think as far as your business, if you don't have a good grasp on these principles, I would strongly, from my own experience, I would strongly encourage you to learn these principles, because it will save you a lot of time and make you a lot of money. And you'll give your customer a really good product and end product. Okay, if you've got your key dip right there, so we're gonna call this 394. That's this distance here. Okay, it's a little bit more.
I can see it better than this.
Okay. So at this point, that's where let off is, and what's happening at let off? The jack releases from the butt. That's the point. So here, this distance here is 0.080. Okay? So that's the amount that the key is going to travel while the jack is not connected with the hammer. Okay? So to achieve this, you know that you want this stuck at 394. So to achieve this, let's look at it this way. If you look at it, there are maybe two ways to adjust aftertouch. One way is by changing the amount that the key can travel. The other way is by changing the dimension of the jack tender to the capstan, or sorry, not the capstan, the let-off button. Okay. If you raise or lower the capstan, that's your let-off. If you raise the jack tender, that's your blow distance. Okay. Did everybody follow that? Yeah, then this would be the third way. Okay. Back here. Okay.
You adjust the back tech closer. You'll
Increase your aftertouch.
That's where you're saying a half instead of 5/8.
Yeah.
I like that.
Okay. Let's not bring that into the mix, maybe, for now. This is okay, because this, when I started to understand this, that's when things really started to gel. If you change your change the let-off button. Let's say you lower the let-off button. This is going to come up here. If you lower the let-off button, meaning that all of this space here, the tender is approaching the let-off button, and here's the point that it contacts, and it might take a little bit to let off. So the tender is approaching the let-off button, and then boom, it kicks out, and you've got a lock. If you do the opposite, if you change the, let's say you raise the let-off button way up, well then you can get let off down there. Or if you, let's say you lower it. Let's say you lower it so that the let-off button is touching the jack tender. Your aftertouch is going to be right there. Because as soon as you touch the key, the tender is going to come in contact with the let-off button. It's going to let off. So all of this is the aftertouch. Okay, but we already know, huh? Okay. But we already know where we want the let-off button. We already know because that's determined by the location of the strings. So So instead of changing the position up and down of the let-off button, we're going to change the position of the jack tender. Okay, and the third way, which is the key dip, let's say you have let-off here. If you take some punchings out, you could have your 80 thousandths right here, but then you introduce a problem here. Now instead of 394, you've got 450. So you know you don't want to do that. So that's a no-go.
So that
Is it making sense?
So the gauge you're talking about, is that the one you slip underneath?
Oh yeah, okay. Okay, that 80 thousandth gauge. So Carl made a, oh yeah, thanks. Okay, so it's just a key top with this notch taken out. That's where it goes in on the, here.
And then you put the punching on it? Or does it-
So that it's 80 thousandths. So
If
the
the
idea
plastic
is-
was thick enough, you wouldn't need a punch.
The plastic is usually 50 or 52 thousandths, so if he adds the 30 thousandth punching on it, that's what he gets.
So if you're using this gauge, see, I know I do it with a gram, but I've never thought about using the gauge on an upright before. So how do you just play it pretty hard and just see where it stops and see if the jack's not?
No, okay. Okay, so
Don't press it down.
okay. So the way let's back up on the checklist a little bit and talk about how I use this, because I use it differently for the sharps and for the Nashvilles. So we've got our key dip, we've got our let off, because key dip is determined by the dip block, and let off is determined by the strings. So the only thing we have left is to give us the right aftertouch is the blow distance. So what I do is I raise and lower the hammer rest rail. Glue felt under there. You start by just putting some felt under there, and then you set some samples. Okay. To the point where when you put that aftertouch gauge in there, and you push the key down, it should, as soon as it hits that aftertouch gauge, the jack should just start to move. Okay, so if you pull the aftertouch gauge out, then it kicks out, because that 80 thousandths is your aftertouch. It was taken up by the
So
aftertouch.
you're really hoping that all the parts are made correctly and that it's going to be consistent from note to note, or?
Well, he's done that before, though.
You've
He's
regulated
fixed a lot
all
of
of that
that.
so that this is the only option.
And do you find that's really consistent, if you do one key and you get the, because that's a global change you're making with the rest rail, right?
That's right. Yeah, and unfortunately you can't regulate, and that's a good point. So what you're going to find, that's actually a great observation. That's why you set samples, because what you're going to find is some notes are going to be 60 thousandths, while others are 100 thousandths or 120 or 40 and 120 of aftertouch. But because you only have one position of the hammer rest rail, you just got to live with it. So that's a great observation. And that's why you set samples, because you want to make sure that the position that you leave the hammer rest rail, that you're going to have at least 40 or 50 thousandths minimum, I think, of aftertouch on all of them. I would rather have 40.
Your most offending keys, you've got to make sure you adjust that those will work, and so you just have to make a compromise between.
Yeah, that's right. It's a compromise. And I would rather have 120 or 130 aftertouch, if that means that I've got to have.
And you
40
never
on others.
play with the dip. I mean, adjust it, like pulling out a punch or something.
No, I do that.
Tell him how you use it on the,
Sometimes you have to.
tell him how you use it on the sharps.
Okay,
You
so
adjust the rail.
so that's just for the whites, right? And you haven't done the key dip, by the way, yet on the sharps. Okay, you've only done the key dip on the whites. When you've got your hammer rest rail in a position that you feel comfortable with, do all the lost motion. And by the way, the point where I like the lost motion is that if I push the key down, I don't see any difference between the hammer and the back check. But if I wiggle it ever so slightly, I can just barely make that back check wiggle before the hammer starts to. So this, I can make this wiggle before the hammer starts to go. That's where I like my lost motion. And of course, you can always check by pulling back on the hammer rest rail, making sure that those shanks are in fact resting on the rest rail, not on the jack. Okay. So you've got your, yeah.
I might just be a little bit confused, but I've always thought that between 30 and 50 thousandths is an acceptable range. I'm just kind of wondering where the 80 and 120 comes in.
That's for grand, really.
Okay.
That's the 30 to 50, that's what I do on a grand,
That's for
right?
grand.
That we do.
So,
He's talking
Say for-
uprights,
okay.
right, Vinny?
Old uprights.
Yeah.
Hold on, right, okay.
What does that make it feel like for the performer?
Well, they're happy.
It's an upright band.
I think what Brigham's getting at is that they're happy it works and that it feels better than it did.
But he's pretty consistent in that,
Yeah.
you know, with that, using his gauges and things,
Yeah.
so that's really good. But the precision is not, doesn't have to be like a grand.
I don't think it can be.
Yeah, can't either. You have to have some more safety factor.
Okay, so you've done your whites. You've set the key tip. You've set the hammer rest rail, and now the sharps.